Hello and welcome to this episode of The Inner Estate. I'm really thrilled to introduce you to our guest today, Dr. Yosi Amram. Yosi, thank you for being our guest today.
Thank you, Bridget. I'm delighted to be here and appreciate your welcoming warm smile right now and the little chit chat we had in the 2 minutes before the recording started. So I'm excited to see where we go together, where you lead us.
Well, I think that there's so many things that you and I could discuss together because there seems to be an alignment in some of our, I'll say, passions. And the reason I mention that is you caught on that the title of this podcast is The Inner Estate, and that really is all about our own internal subconscious, our self-perception. What are we doing to lead ourselves and love ourselves? And you are one of the foremost authorities on spiritual intelligence and spiritually intelligent leadership. In fact, you even have a book out about that. So I was really excited to have this opportunity to speak with you. Can you share with everyone on a broad view, what does that mean to you and why are you passionate about it?
Well, why am I passionate about it? Because of however many years I've lived that got me to here that say, okay, this is really the culmination of my life's journey. And we can't make sense of our lives, or at least I couldn't looking forward. I mean, if you asked me when I was, in my teens or is where was I going to be, I would have never guessed this. But, I did have a passion to want to build an organization that's rooted in humanistic values that would help and bring the best out in people. That inspiration, that motivation was born out of something that may sound strange, but out of serving 3 years in the Israeli military right after my high school. I was
Right.
drafted into the military, mandatory service. I was a pacifist, math and science nerd, but to my surprise, I had the fastest promotion record in the history of my regiment. So I was thrust into this command and control model of leadership, and I excelled at it for whatever reason. But it really chafed at my soul, and I didn't like it. So luckily, it was peaceful time, and I said, okay, I love building a community of people that's aligned, where people are devoted and there's a real cohesion and a sense shared of destiny. But I don't like the subjugation of the individual and the individual development. So that led to my passion and dream in coming to the US and studying engineering and business, but ultimately becoming an entrepreneur. And guess what? My first company was called Individual Inc. It was all about the individual, even though it was about
Nice.
supporting the individual in a team community context. And in fact, our product was about personalizing the news. So you would get Bridget's Morning News. It was the first personalized interactive newspaper for the internet. Anyway, I could talk a lot more about it and pat myself on the back, but the
It's
point
pretty
is,
cool.
it was cool. It is cool, but but the point was that the idea of the individual and the uniqueness that each of us represent and our interests and how to support each individual while also giving us that sense of belonging was what motivated me to start the company. Of course, I also wanted to get rich and
Right.
famous and the rest of it. But what I discovered along the way is I was very passionate and about that company, and I worked 70, 80-hour weeks for years. I thought I was living my dreams, but really I was burning myself out until one day I had sort of an awakening experience. A spiritual awakening experience, lying on a massage table, trying to relax. And, I was getting a deep tissue massage, and all of a sudden my ego relaxed and open. And I was knocked into this deep state of being, of seeing the interconnectedness of everything. And that sort of understanding changed the direction of my life. Unfortunately, as beautiful and powerful it was, it actually flipped a switch in my mind. It burnt a circuit, and I flipped into a manic episode because I couldn't contain the energy that what I was coming through me. And
Right.
that led to my board pushing me out of the company, quote unquote, putting me on a voluntary leave of absence. There was nothing voluntary about it. And it was a public company at the time, and there were headline stories in the New York Times and Wall Street Journal and about how I was pushed out and our stock collapsed that day, and there were rumors about how I was emotionally unstable. And so it was very painful experience. I lost my baby. But that got me to go on a journey of exploration to understand, why was I so identified with the company that I burnt myself out? Was
Right.
this awakening thing real, or was it delusion? And that changed the direction of my life, where I went back and studied psychology, and particularly got a PhD in a field called transpersonal psychology, which integrates traditional psychology with spirituality to understand the deeper, higher potential of our human psyche. So I'll pause there. I could keep going, but I'm just trying to. So
Well,
the threads of psychology, spirituality, awakening, leadership, these are kind of the threads that my current work and this book, Spiritually Intelligent Leadership, brings together, and that's why I'm passionate about it. And there's
it's really
more.
remarkable that something caused that breakthrough for you. And I understand, if I understand you correctly, I think when it first happened, you probably were riding a wave of spirituality and emotion and excitement. And you probably, I'm guessing, tell me if I'm wrong, you probably thought, wow, this is the beginning of an incredible new chapter and we're all going to rise together and move forward. And then it turned into a remarkably painful time. I just find that intriguing. Were you surprised at the direction that it took in the moment? Were you
Yeah,
shocked?
yeah, very much so. But yeah, I mean, so you mentioned the breakthrough, but before that there was some kind of a breakdown where I was
Hmm.
exhausted and burned out, or you might call it a dark night of the soul. And then there was this
Right.
breakthrough of an awakening, and then there was a breakdown of my personality and the path that I thought I was on, that somehow this awakening, was all going to be wonderful, but it
Right.
also, life threw me a curveball. And when I was thrown out of the company, so it's kind of like life has its own intelligence, and I could have never guessed or, scripted it, but it all
Right.
worked out, and it all what brought me to this point where I'm passionate about the intersection of understanding our psychology, our motivation, our inner state,
Hmm.
and as you play on the word in your podcast title,
Right.
and sort of our spirituality, and the meaning that we make of our lives, and then our well-being as individuals, but also how we're interconnected. And there's so much going on in the world right now, and has been happening over the last few years, that just kind of really hits us hard on the head, regardless of where you are, which side of the political spectrum or
Right.
whatever. It just says, wow, I cannot just isolate myself from
Right.
what's happening around me. Maybe some people can. You can go and meditate in a cave in the Himalayas. But for most of us who live in, a normal life
Right.
in
Right.
civilization, it's, it just started with COVID, where it hit us that,
It really did. That just yanked the rug out, from civilization. It was fairly dramatic, I would say. What's intriguing to me is when I think about what you're discussing in terms of leadership.
uh-huh.
And you mentioned, thank you for bringing that up. There's the command and control style of leadership. And what you are assisting CEOs that seek your counsel or your coaching, the book that you've written, you're saying let's go beyond IQ or even EQ and tie into that spiritual energy that is within us as leaders. And how can we develop that and share that energy and have a ripple effect on everyone in our organization or everyone around us?
Yeah, I mean, I remember one of my first business school cases at Harvard years ago was managers and leaders. Are they the same or different? And
Hmm.
it was a classical essay book by this professor at Harvard, Zeleznik. And the point was that managers, are important, make decisions, allocate resources, etc. And then leaders, what do leaders do? I mean, mostly we talk about inspiration. And what do leaders do? They inspire. And what is the root of the word inspire is spirit. And what
Spirit.
is that? Is the animating breath of life. It comes from Latin. Spirit is the animating life force. So leaders animate their organizations and people around them by inspiring them, by breathing passion and cohesion, by setting a vision or saying, this is what we're about, this is the calling, this is our purpose, this is how we're going to serve the world, this is how we're going to serve the marketplace or our citizens if you're in a nonprofit. It could be in any context, but you have to have a shared sense of mission and vision and
Right.
purpose and values for people to come together. And that's so crucial in this day and age because we're suffering from a loneliness epidemic and people spend the bulk
Yes.
of our waking hours at work. So work becomes our main community. And it's so important for people to buy into what the organization is doing and feel some shared identity and purpose and values with our colleagues, which gives us a sense of belonging. And then our energies are aligned and there's resonance and there's coherence in the organization rather than toxicity and politics. So all of that, though, starts with the leaders setting the tone and then being inspired to work toward the vision that they're passionate about. And then people that are resonant with that vision, with that mission, with those values are naturally drawn in. And then you have that
Right.
cohesion. And then the organization is that much more effective. So this all sounds nice and spiritual and touchy-feely, but the bottom line is that, in my research, I showed that leaders that exhibit more spiritual intelligence lead teams with higher morale, greater commitment, lower turnover. And since then, even when you control for emotional intelligence has an impact, spiritual intelligence has an impact, but the two of them are multiplicative and complementary. And since then, there's been research that showed that leaders with higher spiritual intelligence produce better financial results for their business
Nice.
units. And then banks that had higher level of spiritual intelligence with their employees produce better return on assets compared to other banks. So this isn't just touchy-feely,
Woo
kumbaya,
woo.
whatever, woo-woo, but
Right.
it actually pays for the bottom line, and people are
Yeah.
happier, and the organization is more effective in its business mission. So,
And you're likely to have better retention of
yeah.
talent.
Yeah, and it's so critical now because, the labor market is so competitive and you wanna retain the best people, and you're
Hmm.
relying on their innovation, and so you gotta I mean, all the research shows that money matters to some extent but beyond a certain point, people want to work for people that understand them, who coach them, who mentor them, that support their personal development, that they buy into what the organization is doing. So, just cracking the whip or offering financial bonuses and threats and fear, like I'll fire you if you
Right.
don't perform, it doesn't
Right.
bring out the best in people.
No, it has not ever, and I don't believe it will ever. I have a question for you. If someone's listening to us right now, some people struggle with the word spiritual.
Mhm.
And they mean, they get caught up in, well, wait, what does this Yosi mean? Is he talking about religion? Is he talking about faith? Is he talking about the universe? Like, so when you use spiritual intelligence, could you just address a few of those questions that someone might have in their mind right now of what is it that you are really talking about?
Okay, great. That's a great basic question. I'm glad you're asking. So let me so there's a big difference between being spiritual and being spiritually intelligent. I'll make the radical statement, but hopefully I can back and you'll push me on it so that you could be spiritually intelligent without even being identifying yourself as a spiritual person. And so
Hmm.
I'll come back. What is spiritual intelligence? So let me define it. But before I do that, I'm going to make a sidetrack to motivate it. And because we now understand the importance of emotional intelligence that has
Yes.
entered the cultural mainstream.
Yes.
And that was a concept put forward by two academicians in 1990, which was then popularized by Daniel Goleman. But up
Hmm.
until then, there's a dichotomy between emotion and reason. So if I said, Bridget, do you know some people in your life who are emotional? You might think of some people, and it wouldn't necessarily be the best compliment, right? There'd be someone that
Correct.
is dramatic, they tear
Yep.
up.
Overly reactive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
emotional. And then if I said, you know, someone who's emotionally intelligent, that would be a different set of people that they could draw on emotional resources and information to help manage their own emotions and relate to others better. So what is
Right.
emotional intelligence? Is the ability to draw on and use emotional resources and information to manage our own emotions and others. Okay, so the focus is using emotional resources. So, by analogy, what is spiritual intelligence? I've been talking around it, but you haven't asked me, well, Yossi, what the heck is it? Can you simply define it? So, let's see
Mhm.
if I can define what this thing that I'm talking about in big words. So, spiritual intelligence is the ability to draw on, cultivate, and embody spiritual resources and qualities that have been celebrated as virtues for thousands of years across all the world's spiritual and wisdom traditions. So, what are those? These are things like purpose, service, trust, gratitude, humility, compassion, integrity, and so on. These are the qualities. I interviewed 71 spiritual leaders and teachers across all the world's traditions, from Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Buddhism, Hinduism, Taoism, what have you. And regardless of their theology or belief system, or you might call religion or whatever it
Mhm.
is, they spoke about these qualities as being central to their lives. These are the qualities they cultivated, they embodied in their lives. And so these are the qualities that I'm talking about. You, you know, and there's a big distinction between a spiritual belief system. Someone could be spiritual and believe in higher power. They could believe in the immortality of the soul. They could whatever. So they can have all kinds of beliefs. We can also have a spiritual experience. I can go to church on Sunday and pray and meditate and feel connected to higher power. I can
Right.
meditate and have my ego dissolve and be in samadhi, as they call it, or oneness. Or I can walk in the forest and feel one with nature and have my ego dissolve. These are important, nice experiences. But spiritual intelligence is, how do I embody these qualities in daily life? If I'm in a team meeting, do I want to be proven right, or am I trying to do the right thing? So if I'm trying to prove myself right, it's because I'm trying to elevate and my reputation and my ego and so on, versus doing the right thing. So it you know, people can go to be spiritual and believe in whatever they want, go to church, go to the mosque, go to temple, synagogue, and pray and do all this stuff. But then when the rubber meets the road, they're not. So, you know, I know people that are in my client base. I've worked with over 100 CEOs, and they've been all over the range of, you know, devout religious people, spiritual but not religious, agnostic,
Right.
or atheist. But regardless of where they are on the spectrum, it's the embodiment of those qualities of a sense of purpose, a call to service, the embodiment of trust or expressing gratitude, and integrity, that were the qualities that made them inspired and inspiring to others around them. So I hope I'm answering your question. I want to say a couple
You
more
are.
things about it, but let me just pause there for a sec.
Yeah, you're answering the question. One category that you left out of that little list, which I know was not all inclusive, there's even some people that I would say are religious yet not spiritual because they're not in touch with the
Yeah, they could be religious and they could be into the dogma, and
right, right.
there's
Yeah,
not the openness, etc. Yeah, so that can be too. So yeah, it's good to unpack and differentiate between religion, spirituality,
right,
spiritual intelligence, spiritual belief, spiritual experience. But again, you know, it's that's why I also said you don't have to be, you could be emotional and not be
right.
emotionally intelligent. You could
Correct.
be emotionally intelligent and not emotional, and
Right.
quote unquote. So the same.
Yeah.
So if I can just build on that a little bit more,
I
and
would
that
love that.
is, so I mentioned these are the qualities that I'm calling spiritual intelligence and the ability to embody them. Now, the good news is there's two other fields of studies that highlight the importance of these qualities, and one of them is positive psychology. So
Mhm.
there is a whole field that started by Marty Seligman that said, okay, psychology is not just about like dealing with pathology and neuroses like Freud was focused on, but and not just dealing with mental illness, but what are the qualities that enhance the good life? And
Yes.
so they developed this thing called the Character Strengths Inventory or Values in Action. It's a scale that has 24 sub subdomains. And in my model and what came out of my research of spiritual intelligence, there are these 22 qualities, and over half the qualities match one to one in terms of purpose and transcendence and gratitude and so on. So, the field of positive psychology is basically now, in the last whatever long it's been, 20, 30 years,
20.
is
Yeah, 20 years.
discovering that, these qualities that these traditions for thousands of years have said about, purpose, service, trust, gratitude, humility, integrity, etc., is what positive psychology says that's what leads to good life. So it's kind of validating when you have completely different fields of study with many researchers pointing in the same direction.
Yeah, with that much overlap in result, where it can lead to positive outcomes and influence and leadership, leading people that are craving that.
Right. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
that brings in me to this other field called leadership development. So there's a whole body of research and study around what makes for effective leaders. And among those top quality, many of those things around purpose or servant leadership or centeredness or whatever. So there was a study done by Bain and Company, which is one of the top management consulting companies in the world that
Hmm.
consults with, the Global 2000 and does
Is
millions of
that
dollars.
is that Bain Henyon that's part of
No,
that
it's
group?
just they're based in Boston. Bain and
Okay.
Company is a
Hmm.
big management consulting where the top
Right.
people out of Harvard and Stanford get recruited and to become consultants, and they consult with executives in the Fortune 1,100, and
Hmm.
they do $1 million studies, etc. So they did a research with 2,000 companies to identify factors related to leadership. So the first thing they found is that employees that are inspired are twice as productive as people that are just going about doing their job to earn a paycheck. And then they looked at what were the leadership qualities that made people feel inspired in their work. And what they found is they identified 33 qualities. And again, over half the qualities in my framework of spiritual intelligence maps into these qualities that Bain identified in their study of leadership. So again, integrity, purpose, service, orientation,
Right.
compassion, centeredness. And so again, I'm saying, so there's this knowledge that came down for thousands of years through these
Hmm.
traditions that said this is the good life that's good for you individually and it is pro-social. Then there's this positive psychology field that says these are the qualities that lead to a good, happy, fulfilling life. And then there's this research done in the field of leadership that says what are the qualities that make for effective leaders that inspire people and engender loyalty and trust and so on. And all of these things are coming back to the same thing. And it shouldn't be surprising. We all like
Right.
to work and be around people of integrity that have a sense of purpose, that inspire us to reach our potential for the good of ourselves and the world at large.
Well, I feel like, and this may be oversimplifying, but I feel like the concepts that have tried and true and confirmed by other organizations and other movements in studying leadership and psychology, I feel like when you have a leader that is tapping into the power of spiritual intelligence and emotional intelligence, that they make their team, their employees, and the people around them, even their colleagues, it makes them feel valued. And I
Hmm.
feel like someone that's part of an organization, when they feel like they are valued as an individual, they're going to, as you said, they're going to rise up. It's going to bring about the great result. So I feel like many of the values that you listed, it gets distilled down in when you spend time with someone who embodies that and emanates that, and you know that they chose you, even if it's not your conscious mind. Your conscious mind isn't going like, wow, that great leader picked me. You're not thinking that every day, but your subconscious, you're being validated that this leader I respect that emanates this spiritual intelligence chose me and sees the value in me. And now I'm going to live into that value. Am I on the right
Yeah, yeah.
path
So
there?
just unpack a little bit. So one way it can
Hmm.
be implicit, and another quality of spiritual intelligence I didn't mention relates directly to what you're saying, has to do with presence
Hmm.
and attention and intention. So one of the biggest challenges we're facing in our current attention-based economy, as some people call it, is we're bombarded with social media, text messages, emails, all the stuff, and it's very hard for us to stay focused and attentive. So if I'm a manager, I'm a leader, I'm working with a colleague at any level, or with my teenage kids at home, or my
Right.
spouse, my partner, people are like, at the dinner table and everybody's looking at their phone.
Right.
And so the quality of the conversation degrades, the quality of the interaction, the ability to come together and solve problems. And the implicit message is, you are not important enough for me to devote my time and attention to you, because the scarcest resource we have that's not replaceable is our time and attention. If I
Yes.
if I give someone a few dollars, I can go make another few dollars. There's
Hmm.
not a big deal. But if I give you an hour of my time without interruption, that hour's gone. That hour of my life is spent. I'm gonna get another hour, but I have a finite number of hours, and that's it.
Right.
So when we give someone our time and attention, we're communicating a sense of value, and what you're doing is important, and you're part of the organization. So then everybody feels like they're making a contribution, and each one of us is a unique cell in this larger organism. So if you look at our human body, we all come from the same stem cell. All the cells come in the same stem cell, same DNA, but they differentiate. We have a thing that becomes a retina in our eye, and something else is a cell in our liver, and something else
Right.
is in our lungs, and they each are part of an organ community, if you will, if you want to, or department in the organization, and it needs to take care of itself, but it needs to contribute to that organ, that community, that team, which then contributes to the bigger organism. And if the organism gets sick, regardless of how well you do individually, you're gonna suffer.
Right.
So when people have that sense of belonging and how they are vital, and each part of our body is a vital part of life intelligence. That's why we have a liver and a lung and a heart and eyes and even fingernails. They all play a role. Now,
Right.
some you could say are more important or critical than others, but everybody has a role. And when they understand their role, then they're motivated. Oh, okay, I understand the contribution, how it fits into the bigger picture. And then I'm motivated to do all of that. So, yeah, so when we give people that respect and that sense that you important, you matter, then they rise up. And then like, okay, because if I tell you, oh, what you're doing doesn't matter, it's not important, like, well, why should I work hard and
Right.
go the extra mile to do a good job? It doesn't matter. So
Right.
I'll just do the minimal I can to earn my paycheck.
I mean, I think that's one of the fastest ways to lose true talent is to not let them have the feeling of being seen and valued.
Yeah.
And in a way where, I don't know if you've run into this, where someone will make a decision to leave a great, well-paying, good benefits, job. And when you ask them about it, they say, my values were no longer in alignment with the leadership or the company's values. And I think that they're in some way they had experienced the lack of what we're discussing. And it's
I
so
hear
it's
that all
it's
the
really
time.
important. Yeah,
Yeah, I
I do
hear
too. I
that.
hear it all the time.
Yeah, with people, with
The
friends, with what have you.
Yeah. So it's really I'm thrilled that you've written this book and that you are getting spiritual intelligence and spiritually intelligent leadership into the vernacular, getting that out here. I feel as if not only can it help, we've talked about the impact it would have on others in the organization. We started this we're circling back. Yosi, we're going back to when you said you had reached a point where you were burnt out. This won't be a news flash. Many people in leadership are feeling burnt out for some reason or another right now. And what I wanted to ask you is if a leader is feeling overwhelmed or burnt out or run down, whatever the choice of words, is it possible that tapping into and developing their spiritual leadership skills, spiritually intelligent leadership skills, that could help to heal the burnout that they're feeling?
Yeah, very much so. So this actually touches on something that occurred to me I should have mentioned earlier in terms of the spiritual intelligence, what it is. And because I mentioned these qualities and I gave all the reasons why they're important qualities and how they come from all these traditions for thousands
Mhm.
of years and converge with positive psychology and leadership. But then you said, well, why call them spiritual intelligence as opposed to something else? And one of the reasons is they are common across all the spiritual traditions, but the other is that they naturally emerge when we are connected to our essence, when we are connected to our spirit, so to speak, our spark of life, our life force. When we're connected to our life force energy, then these qualities naturally emerge. And so how does this relate to, so that's why I think it also makes sense to call it spiritual intelligence. But coming back to your question more directly, if people are burned out, oftentimes it is because there is a disconnection between, our heart's deepest desire and what our soul is longing for, and all this energy that we've invested in getting to something. People are like, okay, well, I just want to earn the VP title or want to make
Right.
whatever. And we work hard, 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 and we get there. And then we find that it's not scratching the itch or it's not really fulfilling us at the deepest level. So one of the things I like to do with my clients and is to always connect to our depth and what is my heart's deep desire. So when I'm burned out, it means that there's a misalignment between what my essence, what my soul, my heart's deepest desire, and what I'm doing in the world. So
Doing every day.
it's not just that I'm overworked. Yeah, I'm overworked. Okay, maybe I need to take a vacation for a week. Fine. But people get into a deeper sense of burnout because what they're doing is not so connected to their essence, or if I take the risk and use the word soul, which is hard to
Mm.
define, but it has to do with our essence. But in common vernacular, we ask people, how's your spirit today? And we, right? And I don't know what do we mean, but we have a sense when we feel someone's life force and vitality and vibrancy. It usually is because there's an alignment between their life force energy and how they're expressing it.
Right.
And then so that feeds them and then becomes energizing, revitalizing, etc.
Well, you're exactly right. Are times when this just happened last week. I went to a dinner with a group of my colleagues from around the country. We were all in Atlanta for an event, and it was the day that I had traveled. I felt great. Everything was good. Like I thought I was fine. I sat down at a dinner table, and a lady who's known me for a long time, close colleague, leaned over and she said, "Are you okay?" We pick up on this stuff whether we know we do or not. And I looked around, I was like, "Yeah, I'm fine," and I was. So I wasn't putting a mask on. I actually was. I told her, I made a joke. I said, maybe it's because I don't have any mascara on, just making a joke. But she had the concern and I don't know what she picked up on, but we're picking up on people's energy before they even really speak. And as you
Uh-huh.
said, when we're connected with people, then that stimulates us to seek, oh, are they okay? So it's something we're doing all the time, whether we realize it or not.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And now there's more and more science that, you know, this research thing, the heart math, and we know that our hearts actually emit electromagnetic radiation, that when you're in the vicinity of someone 6, 8, 10 feet, our hearts are exchanging electromagnetic
Hmm.
information. We don't know it consciously. So, and then we're talking about this thing called mirror neurons, and that happens even in lower primates. So, when that gives us some basis for empathy. And so, yeah, and I'm glad you're bringing it up into a social context, not just at work. This is a friend slash colleague. So right now I'm actually working on research applying spiritual intelligence in primary attachment romantic relationships and looking at how spiritual intelligence, emotional intelligence, and attachment factors that everybody talks about, secure attachment, insecure attachment, anxious, avoidant attachment, and seeing
Right.
what explains relational satisfaction. So I've just completed a study with 100 couples, and
That
spiritual
sounds great.
intelligence is just as important in relationship, more important than many of the other factors. So all of them seem to contribute and matter, but spiritual intelligence and having a spiritually intelligent relationship is super important to explaining satisfaction. So these same qualities of purpose and trust and what have you, and beauty, that are qualities of spiritual intelligence, play in the dynamic of our relationship. So you could think about, I can have a sense of purpose that relates to my work, but in a partnership, I want my partner to understand and support my purpose.
Right.
And if I have trust, in general trust, it leads to optimism and hope as a leader. But it's important that I have trust in my partner with my vulnerable feelings and my needs, and that I trust my partner to lean on them. So these very qualities, or humility, and not, it's so important in relationship. It's not about being right. It's wanting to understand. So it's this balance of being assertive of our own needs and standing our ground, but also being curious. And it's not about getting my way. So all these things around egolessness and humility and gratitude, expressing gratitude and appreciation, that are important in the work context and leadership, are super important in these relationships. And so I'm just trying to bring it into, like you're saying, in a social context, you're meeting this
Right.
person, colleague, friend, that picking up on your energy
Hmm.
and how it affects them. Because we all know when we walk into a room and somebody is sad, we don't even see them. Their face is turned, or they're angry. You feel there's a
We can
density
feel it.
of the energy in the room feels heavy, or there's a lot of sadness or anger or whatever.
Right.
So we pick up this information. I don't exactly know how. It's mysterious still, but we do all have that experience. I think most of us do, at least.
Yeah, I think so too. Unless there's an actual issue.
Uh-huh.
I do think that we pick up on it, and whether we know it or not. And then when we receive it, it's interesting too, as we're discussing this, because I know and trust Deb on this professional level. I took it as concern and I felt valued. I thought, she's concerned about me. And I was just thinking about how differently it lands if we don't have trust in the person. Then it almost can feel like, is that an attack? I wouldn't say that, but it can land on you differently. It's interesting.
Yeah, like you're bringing her down or something, like
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
not
right,
entertaining
right,
her. Oh,
right. Yeah,
yeah. So, but you felt her compassion and
I
care,
did. Yes. So it
as
felt
opposed to
it
like
felt
some.
very warm
Yeah,
and welcomed, and
yeah,
made me feel valued. Not to overuse
yeah,
that phrase, but I did.
yeah.
Yossi, I'm really fascinated that you're getting so advanced in the studies you're doing with couples, and how this spiritual intelligence is actually present in couples. Could you explain a little bit more about all of that?
Sure. I mean, as I kind of intimated before, the same qualities of presence, compassion, forgiveness that are so important in other dimensions of our lives become so crucially important in intimate relationships, where
Mhm.
our buttons get pushed and our history and our wounds come into play. And so when couples approach the relationship as a ground for healing and growth, amazing things can happen. And so, I could tell all kinds of stories about people that get with escalated conflicts and they're not seeing each other, and how just slowing down and starting even with a self-compassion practice that calms our nervous system, then we can extend that compassion to our partner, and then we're on the same team. All of a sudden see that we're both suffering, and then the conflict de-escalates and we can work together. Or, recently was working with someone that uh, was his partner's wife had an affair, and they thought they forgave and it was done, and now they're considering another child, a second child. All of a sudden, he was kind of back to feeling the sadness and the hurt from that. But as he went in, discovered that that actually touched a wound that he had as a child where he felt betrayed by his dad, who he
Hmm.
overheard his dad say to his mom, we don't have to honor our promise to him to buy him a bicycle for the birthday. And, he felt totally betrayed. So this betrayal touched into this deeper betrayal. But as he connected with his younger part and extended compassion to that younger part, then his heart opened and he could actually move into compassion to his partner and his dad and forgiveness. So it's amazing that the depth that people can enter in their healing and how these same qualities of compassion, forgiveness, presence, trust are so important in the leadership domain play out in couples and using that to fuel passionate relationships that are conscious.
You mentioned the F word, forgiveness, and boy, is that something that so many of us struggle with. I'm. Forgiveness can be difficult, and that cliche of when you forgive, you're actually giving a gift to yourself and you're going to reap the rewards. So the example you gave of this gentleman, as the way you described it, by opening his heart and reconnecting and having some healing and compassion for his father and himself as a child, and then that spread to include his wife and their family, his immediate family he was creating, really he was the recipient of some of the biggest benefits of him allowing himself to forgive. So it is remarkable to me that you're able to have that impact with couples and that you discovered it by the work you were doing with leaders. It's very exciting that you're able to work with this. Where is that leading? Is that leading to, say, another book? Is it leading to events or services that may be provided, or is it too soon to know?
It will lead eventually to another book on spiritually
Okay.
intelligent relationships. So I'm
Okay.
I'm I'm building the research and the case studies and situations with my clients. But yeah, just to highlight what you said though, forgiveness is a process, and we
Yes.
can't just say, okay, I like he said they thought he had forgiven her, but it just came back up. And but it was curious is that he couldn't just will himself to forgiveness is by going into the and opening to the pain of the betrayal
Hmm.
that opened to the compassion quality to first towards himself, and then once he had compassion and his heart opened up to his younger part, then his open-hearted compassion could extend to his partner and to his
Right.
dad. So part of spiritual intelligence is opening up to all of life, and that includes our pain, our sadness, our anger. And when we open up to it, then the energy could start to move. And then we could discover whatever messages, because he didn't realize that he carried on this sense
Hmm.
of betrayal from his dad that
Right.
made it hard for him to trust people because there was a
Right.
deep wound around trust and betrayal. And so when we get triggered like that, we could try and push it aside and like, oh, that's unpleasant. I want to forget about it. That happened
Right.
5 years ago, 10 years ago, 50 years ago. But when we open up to it, we discover the hidden treasure and the nuggets.
Yes.
And so that's kind of the beauty of this process. If you are interested in this kind of inner work to cultivate your inner estate.
That's right. And I think a lot of our listeners are because they are desiring to create. I usually reference it as, their life by design and not by default. Like they want to proactively create their existence and their families. And so it's very appealing.
Yeah,
And
so
thank you for
they're
sharing that.
intentional and conscious
Right.
about the kind of life we want.
Right.
So consciousness, intention, bringing attention to that intention is some of the dimensions of spiritual intelligence. Intention and attention are hugely important.
I want to talk for one moment about your book, Spiritually Intelligent Leadership. So if anyone is listening to the two of us that is either an entrepreneur, building their business, maybe solo, maybe small team, or they've been in leadership, they've been a CEO. I believe you were a CEO for 14 years. Is this book more for one or the other? Is it for people starting out? Is it for established? Are the practices, because you give case studies and exercises to do, would it benefit anyone who's in leadership, regardless of length of time or size of the organization?
I'll be brief. Yes.
Good.
The answer is yes to all of the above. You instead of this or that, it's a
It's
yes
for
and.
all.
It's for all. I think, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's written for people who are in leadership positions, either current or aspiring. But the
Mhm.
reality is that all of us are leaders in the sense that we influence people around us. And I've had people that, like, I had a friend who's a CEO who read it and he found it helpful, and it was just laying it on his desk. And then his daughter, who's like 20, who's just finishing college. Well, this is interesting. She read it. She found it useful to connect with herself, with her values, with her
Right.
sense of purpose and whatever. So I've had many people that found it helpful just because of, like you said, each chapter focuses on one quality, and then it starts with a case study of a client and how that quality wasn't quite manifesting for them, and how that was a problem, and how working on developing, cultivating, and touching into that resource help them address the problem they were facing in their business or their organization. So it's relatable. And then there are exercises, which is the core of the value added. It's not a book to read and then just say, okay, now I've mastered spiritually intelligent leadership.
Right. Right.
It's like reading a book about physical fitness. Okay, now you've read the book, you know all the muscle groups and what exercises to do, but you gotta go work
And do it.
out. You
Right.
gotta go, and it's an ongoing process. So it's an experiential book. I mean, reading the map is helpful in and of itself, but anyway, I'm doing a little
You have to
commercial
take the
for my
journey.
book. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's one of the things that just popped into my mind as you were telling us about the 20-year-old daughter that read it. That's what's meaningful to me. Even if someone is a solo entrepreneur, you still lead yourself every day. We lead
Well,
ourselves every day, and our longest lasting relationship is with ourselves. It's something that I feel can benefit any of us that have that drive to have an impact on others. And we start by
well,
doing that within our own self and,
yeah, you
giving
haven't said that
ourselves that respect.
the subtitle of the book is How to Inspire by Being Inspired. So yeah,
Mm.
leadership is an inside job for first and foremost. We can't lead
Right.
anybody else until when we lead others. So even if you don't have a formal leadership position as an entrepreneur, as an entrepreneur, you are probably selling, you have clients,
Yes.
so you're constantly influencing others, you're trying to inspire them to work with you in whatever capacity. So, yeah, so connecting, and it sometimes as an entrepreneur, it's a lonely role and
Yes.
you're slugging it out. So I think it's super important to connect with, why am I doing this? What is important? How is this personal to me? What core values, what are, that I'm doing this business that I'm doing? And that's what gives fuel to the journey as an entrepreneur, which is not easy. You get a lot of rejection, it's
Right.
lonely, and all these things. So yeah, you have to lead yourself, and you have to lead yourself by getting inspired, and you get inspired for the long road and sometimes challenging road ahead is by connecting with the deeper layers of meaning and values that this enterprise represents for you and why you're doing this
Right.
in the first place. And if you're disconnected with that, if you're just doing it for fame and whatever, that lasts for a while, but after a while it feels empty
It
and
fades.
shallow and and fake. And so it's hard to get out of bed in the morning and deal with the rejection or challenges or.
I'm going to put you on the spot. There's a tactical side to all of this. As you said, you have to do it. You can't read it and then put the book back on the shelf. Well, I read it. So if someone is desiring to have change for themselves in this arena, and
Uh-huh.
develop these skills and restore that connection if they've lost it, what do they actually do? Like, what is one little thing someone could do today that would move the needle in the right direction?
Well, like anything, so it's like we talked the analogy about physical fitness and exercise. So you can't build all your muscle groups at once, right? You can't you got to say, okay, today I'm going to go to the gym and work on my triceps or biceps or whatever. And so you start with an intention, and the first thing is to set an intention for one of these qualities. So I think the two best qualities that most commonly to start with, one is gratitude, because that affects so much the attitude of our gratitude. There's so much research suggests that that
Right.
energizes us, makes us happy. So you start with a gratitude practice, like I wake up every morning, I'm say, hey, thank you for the gift of another day. At nighttime, I have kind of my journal of all the things that happened today that I'm grateful for, including the difficult moments and what
Right.
lessons were in there. So take a quality like gratitude and integrate that into your day for a month. You build a habit, and then you start to notice as you go around your day, you are more grateful for moments that energize and bring joy, and then you share that gratitude, and that builds human connection. So that would be one place to start. Another would be to look at your sense of purpose, because that's also foundational, and ask ourselves, what are the unique gifts and talents that life has given me? I think each of us has different set of natural talents. And just like when I give a friend a gift for their birthday, when I come a month or a year later, I want to know that they unpacked it. It's not just sitting
Right.
in the closet and in the basement gathering dust. So life gives each of us a gift, as we are this one cell in this multicellular organism of our world, of our society, this web of life. And life basically asks that we unpack those gifts and put them to good use. So to discover our purpose, we have to ask, what are my unique gifts, talents, and then how can I put them to good use? Because when I do that, I feel actualized, and those are the things I'm naturally be competent in. And if I make a contribution, then I embedded myself into that. I have a sense of belonging with those I'm
Right.
serving and helping through that. So I think that's a great place to ask ourselves, what is my purpose? What are my talents? How can I use them to contribute and actualize myself and be good at it and feel like I have an impact, like we all want to. So those would
Well,
be two
if
things that you could start with.
that
Uh,
anyone could start with, regardless of the starting point.
yeah.
Well, if somebody is interested in connecting with you and seeing about what you do, particularly with CEOs, because you are a CEO coach,
Uh-huh.
we're putting the links to your website and your socials. Anywhere you're consuming this podcast, the information is provided. And your book, of course, Spiritually Intelligent Leadership, is available pretty much wherever you want to buy books. So I checked that out too. I want to share with you, and I've shared it on the podcast before. When I wake up, I have trained myself. I wasn't born this way, but I've trained myself that my first thought every day is another day above ground. Let's go do it. And it's that gratefulness. And even saying that to you now as a recap, I still had energy flow through my body
Yeah,
because I
that's
have
enlivening.
ingrained that in my mind. My youngest sister says that I'm Tigger from Winnie the Pooh, and I accept that with humor, and she's probably right. But so it's funny that we have a similar morning ritual and perspective. I want to thank you for being our guest. The funny thing is, you and I had a great conversation, and yet there's still elements to your practice and your work and your passion that we didn't even touch on yet. One that I'm highly interested in is your research and your groups that you have with masculinity, and then some of the things you do with couples, as you referenced. So I am very excited to learn more about your world and your research and how you're impacting people's lives. But thank you for being our guest today. And if you ever want to come back, I would love to have you come back and we could dive into some of the other things that you're working on.
Thank you, Bridget. I'm honored and delighted to be in this dialogue with you, appreciating your presence and our resonance connection, your warm smile in this moment. So I don't know Tigger, but It's a playful fun Tigger.
Yes, yeah, she likes to make fun. It was said with affection,
No, I
so
know.
it was
I'm
good.
saying that
Yeah,
the flavor of Tigger I'm getting here is a
yeah.
playful, fun one.
Yes. So thank you again for being our guest. If you're listening to this episode of The Inner Estate, I hope you'll come back too and join us for another episode. Please seek out and connect with Yosi, and I cannot wait to finish your book.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much and have a great day.